and welcome back to Weekly Culture Conversations. I'm Danielle Peters, and this is where I take a moment each week to reflect on the real culture conversations I've been having, conversations with early learning leaders who are all at very different stages in their own culture journey. Some are just starting, some are right in the middle, some are tired, unsure, or hesitant to even take that next step. And others are doing the work quietly, consistently, and starting to see what's possible when culture is no longer sitting on one person's shoulders. These conversations are honest, they're messy at times, they're thoughtful, and they always tell me what's really happening in centers right now. We wrapped up week 3 with what I honestly felt like a full immersion into early learning culture. There was calls, check-ins, follow-ups, deep conversations about burnout, well-being, leadership pressure, child-safe culture, and what leaders are actually doing day to day to hold everything together. And I want to start at the end of my week because that's where I finished feeling grounded, proud, and reminded why this work matters so much. I wrapped up the week with a drive up to the sunny coast to spend time with one of our Happy Team Culture clients. I was there to deliver their completed culture resources, work that has been carefully co-created with their leadership team and will be shared with the broader team in the coming weeks. What stood out to me on that day wasn't the resources themselves, although they're beautiful. It was the opportunity to walk through the center with the leaders, to slow down, to observe, and to really feel the environment that they'd created. I spent time with Debbie, the approved provider, and Christy, the center director, and what was immediately noticeable was the calmness. Not the kind of calm that comes from everything being perfect, but the calm that comes from clarity, trust, and shared expectations. You could see it in the way the educators move through the space, in their intentions with each other, and the genuine smiles on their faces. This wasn't accidental. These leaders have worked hard to bring their culture to life intentionally and thoughtfully over many years. And now with our support, they've invited their team into this work, bringing the team's voices front and center. Seeing their culture alive in action, not just written on a wall or something on a computer screen, but not sitting in a folder, but lived every day in the moments. It was really rewarding. And these leaders have done the work, and I'm so proud of what they've created. The next step is going to be sharing these resources with their team so everyone can see their input come to life and then continue to build this culture together. I seriously love what I do, and finishing my week with Debbie and Christy was a true highlight, gold star moment for sure. Earlier in the week, the conversation sounded very different. I spoke with leaders who were setting goals for the year, goals like reducing educator burnout, strengthening well-being, recognizing early signs of fatigue. And when we went a little bit deeper, I started hearing the familiar solutions once again. Wellness Wednesdays, there it is. Oh, more social catch-ups, quarterly team dinners, sharing food from different cultures, trying to bring the lightness back in. None of these things are wrong. I love them. And they come from good intent. But what stood out was that many of the leaders had goals, but they didn't have a plan or a roadmap to get them there. They knew what they wanted to improve, but they didn't yet have a system to support it, especially once the year gains momentum. And that's where the tension lives. One of the most meaningful conversations this week represented the middle of the journey. And this is where I want to slow right down. So this leader's done a lot of work already. The team feels settled. Leadership structure has strengthened. A new second in charge had just come into place at the end of last year, and there was a shared responsibility now. And for the first time in a long time, this leader could actually breathe. And that matters, because what came through so clearly in this conversation wasn't urgency, it was relief. Relief that culture no longer only lives in her head. Relief that she's not carrying every emotional load alone. Relief that she's finally has space to think again. And that space has allowed her to do something really important. She's taken time to reflect on culture, not just for her team, but for herself as a leader. We talked about child-safe culture not as a policy or a standard, but as something embedded in everyday behavior, in how her educators were supporting children through the transitions, and how leaders back in their teams were, doing those hard moments, in how expectations are modeled and reinforced and protected. This leader had already started documenting what they were doing, capturing the how, not just the what. And what I loved most about this conversation was how intentional it felt. No rush, no pressure to perform, just a clear understanding that culture needs to be sustained, not just created. This is the stage where leaders often forget themselves. But here, culture was finally supporting her too. Across all of these conversations, starting, building, embedding, sustaining, the themes were consistent. Leaders are tired. They care deeply. They want their teams to feel safe, supported, and proud of where they work. But mainly they're still relying on energy instead of structure. And energy, it runs out. But what doesn't run out is shared language, clear expectations, consistent rituals, visible leadership behaviors. That's what carries teams through busy periods, not one-off initiatives. The biggest insight this week was culture can't really rely on that motivation alone. Motivation gets you started, but structure keeps you going. And when culture is embedded properly, it supports educators, children, families, and leaders themselves. That's exactly why we help early learning leaders embed child-safe cultures that are visible, consistent, and lived every day through a structured, supported system, not just a one-off PD training, because culture isn't something you add on when you have time. It's something that holds you up when things get hard. I'm filming this today on Australia Day, and as someone who came to Australia over 20 years ago, this day always gives me pause. It reminds me of community, of belonging, of shared responsibility. And as centers head into the start of this year, with families now back at work and children settling into their rooms and the changes, and teams coming together again, the question I'll leave you with is this: are you set up this year to truly enjoy the day-to-day experience in your center? Or Are you relying on good intentions and hoping it all holds together? Culture doesn't have to be heavy, but it does have to be intentional. You don't have to do it alone. So I'll see you next week for more weekly culture conversations.